Item number 14, also referred from Audit and Risk, is in relation to the quarterly report on health, safety and wellbeing, and I'll ask Ian Maxwell to come to the table. Councillor Newman, could I ask you to move this item, and I'll look for a seconder. Deputy Mayor has seconded, and Councillor Newman, would you like to introduce the item?
Thank you, Your Worship. Once again, this is a standing item for the Audit and Risk Committee. It was considered by the committee at its previous meeting. Mr Maxwell can present from the officer's perspective and answer any questions, and I commend the item.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian Maxwell, is there any comments that you'd like to make ahead of the
thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be brief. It's I'll talk initially about COVID. So look, our organisation is geared up to respond to COVID. I think you're all familiar with what's going on in Victoria and Taiwan, Singapore at the moment. So look, we are going to reinvigorate and look at our own systems, recording, tracing. It's I suspect as many parts of New Zealand, we've become a little relaxed, and so we're going to regenerate that sort of activity. In terms of our indicators around injuries and so forth are moving in the right direction. There are some issues in terms of training and completion of or follow through on incidents that are recorded in our information system. There has been improvement in both of those. I think you've got the data for March in front of you. There was improvement in April, and that's ongoing. So there's quite a program working across our organisation around that. And I thought I'd just highlight an issue that the Audit and Risk Committee felt was particularly important, and that was really the role of elected representatives as officers under the legislation. And you'll see there's a number of initiatives that will flow out over the next few months around that will really enable you to more effectively engage in some of the responsibilities that you have under the legislation in terms of being an officer, so asking questions, and there'll be more information brought to you in each report dealing with the health, safety and wellbeing implications, as well as some training and some updating. So look, I'll stop there, Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Ian. And before we proceed on this item, just to note that the next item deals specifically with the Hauora Wellbeing Review, and I'll be asking Jim Stavick to introduce that. So if we could save questions on that to the next item. Just to check if there are any questions on this item. Yes, with Councillor John Watson.
Just a bit of information that will help inform the next one. Ian, in terms of the unions that represent our staff here, we've got the Public Service Association and Auckland Northern Amalgamated Workers Union. What are the percentages of our staff that are involved, if you know, in both those unions, or what numbers? So just get a sense of how many people are covered by.
I haven't got the details with me, but look, in general, the level of union representation amongst our staff would be probably 30%, sort of less than 30%, and the majority of those would be PSA. Most of the A1's membership is in cemeteries, swimming pools and regional parks, so relatively smaller group.
Okay, so there's differences within different parts of the organisation, so there might be relatively high union membership in one part and very little in another. Okay, so that's important to know, and I see that in here there was a reference to increased worker representation. I think it was in this one, key recommendation, enhancing worker representation on committees concerned with health, safety and wellbeing. So we had a rather unusual situation, or for me it seems unusual anyway, at the Port of Auckland, where they at that stage anyway, they weren't even on the Health and Safety Committee. So when we talk about greater worker representation, traditionally in a lot of workplaces that will be a union representative on behalf of workers. What are we really recommending there in terms of our workers, given this low union membership and the kind of uneven nature of the representation?
Look, thank you. That's a good question. So we're bringing to our Health, Safety and Wellbeing Committee, which involves the union membership, a specific proposal around worker representation, and it will be more than just unions. There will actually be representatives of workers. So in parts of our organisation, that occurs now, but it doesn't flow right up through the organisation. We know that's a gap, and that's something we're working on, and you can expect to see some changes over the next sort of few months dealing with that specific issue.
Okay, thank you. Final question, and you very helpfully referenced the position or the status of councillors and their role under the Health and Safety Act. I've never talked or been presented to by a union person. Certainly when the ports unions came on, I found that very instructive and very helpful for getting a sense of what happens on the ground in that workforce. And any of this work, is there going to be an opportunity for us in that role as officers to get some kind of communication or presentation, or however you might like to frame it, from the unions as representatives of selective groups within our organisation?
We're working through that through the chair. We're working through that proposal, but I don't see an issue with that. And I think as we develop it, we can certainly pick up that concept.
Thank you very much. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you. There's two questions I've got. One is I note a serious incident with a cut to a lifeguard's hand on a window catch at Westwave. So what I want to go out a bit wider is when we've got serious renewal issues and maintenance issues in our facilities, which we seriously have in Westwave because it's 30 odd more years old now, and we've got money budgeted, but we're just not getting on with it. How do we, as an organisation, identify those hazards, because then they, and actually put things in place? Because I can imagine that if that handle's breaking, the whole lot will be breaking from time. There'll be an opportunity now for every window handle that's on the sun side of that facility to break in the same way, but we're still, what are we doing about that? Because I think that's that piece where I don't know if we're connecting that and going, oh, that is a hazard, so that's got to get renewed more quickly. That's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'm sure there's facilities that you're responsible for all over the place that we have those issues, and then all of a sudden someone gets stitches in their hand.
Through you, the chair. I'll probably answer that two ways. So there's also another serious incident there about a vehicle rollover. What we did is we noticed there's a number of those. And so there's an illustration there of an investigation that's taking place to deal with that. So that concept is carried through to the example of the cut hand. And where we see, a number of these, or a cluster or an issue, then yes, it will be picked up. And look, we work very, very strongly with our community facilities team and the asset management team, and those sorts of urgent repairs and so forth are undertaken and given priority where there's a health and safety issue.
And just to note, is if it's going to be all the handles, then it's looking at a greater thing than just remedial. It's like, do these need replacing all of it? The other question is, in our top 5 is workplace violence, aggressive behaviour. And talking to different people, I know a couple of people that own pharmacies, they're having huge issues with aggression. In another life, hospitality and retail liquor, huge issues with aggression, whether people are drinking or not. Is there a way as a council, it might be Auckland Unlimited who work with businesses, to be able to, and not want us to cost more money and more work, but I wonder if we have a role in the wider region to look at people are getting more aggressive. It's affecting our staff. It's affecting a lot of retailers and businesses as well. Have we thought about how do we, we've got a lot of plans for Auckland, right? They're not just about us, but how we address that, because I'm seeing it more and more, and I'm sure other people are. People are getting very grumpy and think it's okay to lash out physically, verbally, but it's starting to be a horrible trend in Auckland. I don't know about the rest of the country.
Yes, that's a really complicated issue. Look, through the chair, where our focus has very much been on our people and our contractors and so forth. And certainly you'll see that and with respect to the wellbeing review and indeed here. The sort of wider issue is a matter where particularly some of our customer and community development folk are dealing with or working with. But look, it's a really big issue, right? And we are not alone. And you're quite correct in the sense of the level of anger that seems to exist in our community. So look, what I'm talking about doesn't cover those, but it's yes, our focus is very much on our staff.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Kathy Casey.
Thanks, Ian. I was just reflecting on your paragraphs 21 to 24 about the vaccination rollout among staff. A couple of questions came to mind. I understand that the priority staff already received theirs, but is there a requirement on us to keep a record of who's vaccinated in case of another kind of lockdown later?
No, there isn't. Through the chair. So look, we're following the Ministry for Health guidelines in terms of groups. So increasingly our staff who form into those groups are being vaccinated. But as an employer, we do not hold records of vaccinations of our staff. They are held by the Ministry for Health.
Do you foresee, this is speculation, but do you foresee a time when we're building up herd immunity that will be a requirement? Else how will they know?
Well, the Ministry for Health holds information. It's a matter of whether I suspect it's a privacy matter between the individual and their medical advisors, and as an employer, we're not part of that link.
Thank you.
Interesting question. Right, are there any comments? If there are no comments, it's a noting report, so we note the report and we note that this has been provided to local boards. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. We come now